Everyone, this is the May 9th afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Carla, good afternoon. Can you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fish?
Here.
Hardesty? Udaly?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. Legal counsel, welcome. If you could tell us a little more about the rules of order and decorum, please.
Will do. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on.
Thanks, Trevon.
If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good, thank you. I feel like we need a theme song for that or something. We'll work on it. All right, first up, some housekeeping, please. Everybody do tell my wife. We had a couple of items that were pulled from yesterday's agenda. We did not have a quorum, so we need to hear those items first, but they should not take that long. Carla, items 400 and 403 were pulled. Please read item 400 and then let me know who pulled it, please.
Item 400, amend utility license law to clarify audits and enforcement of audits and provide for administrative appeals. Lightning pulled this.
Is he here? I
He
do
is
not
not.
see him. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next, item 403.
Approve application under the multiple unit limited tax exemption program under the inclusionary housing program for Art Tower located at 1510 Southwest Alder Street.
Who pulled this item?
Lightning also pulled
He's
this one.
also not here yet. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. Next item that we also had to carry over, item 407, the children's levy.
Approve funding recommendations made by Children's Levy Allocation Committee for July 1, 2019 to June 30, 2020.
Colleagues, as many of you know, I stepped in to chair the levies allocation committee after Commissioner Saltzman's retirement, and I'm thoroughly enjoying working with staff and our community partners who are doing such important work throughout the community. Here with us today to talk about some of those organizations and the difference that they're making for Portland families and children's is the PCL Director, Lisa Pellegrino. Welcome. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here today. It's good to see you.
Good afternoon, councilors. Nice to see you all again. We are here, as the mayor said, asking for approval of about $18.9 million in current grants to be renewed for one additional year. We are doing our funding a little bit differently this time, which is why we have this one-year renewal extension. That's not typical. The allocation committee decided to extend sort of our overall funding process to allow time to do a grant-making process review and also do more in-depth community engagement. So that basically has been conducted over the fiscal year 18-19. We've gotten recommendations from PSU, who did the grant-making process review as a qualitative study, in which they talked to people who've applied in the past, those who have been successful and not successful, other funders, and made a bunch of recommendations for how we should change our process. And the community engagement process has concluded, and the report was presented to the committee in the April meeting. That's all up on, both of those reports are up on our website if you are interested in the recommendations for change. The community engagement, to allow time for all those processes to conclude, over this year, we are delaying the competitive funding round until next year. So we'd have time to implement the changes that were recommended. So that's why we offered a one-year extension to all current grantees. They all elected to ask for that extension. Most of them were renewed. The process that we use for considering renewal is a grant performance process, assessment process. You've got a copy of the form in your packet that shows what we complete for each grant. We assess on 5 metrics, whether the grantee is meeting their service goals and the service level that they promised to deliver for us. Are they meeting participation goals? And those include things like attending at a certain level, whether the folks are not exiting very quickly. And we disaggregate that data by race and ethnicity to understand if people are staying in services in a similar percentage to which they're enrolling. We look at outcome goals, we look at staff turnover, and we do a financial review that considers audits and grant spending. So those are done for each grant. Grantees are given a chance to respond to that performance summary. We send all of those out if they're completed with our recommendations in there. There's a space in there for the grantee to put their comments or recommendations in there. That is all sent to the allocation committee. They review all of those grant performance summaries, and then we come together in a public meeting to make decisions. So that's kind of the process for doing those renewals. For the current renewal that we're requesting your approval of, all but 2 current grants were voted to be renewed by the allocation committee. 2 were not voted for renewal, and those were both based on performance concerns, where folks were not able to meet their service goals over time and were not able to cure that, even though given a chance to do that. 3 grants were renewed with conditions, so 3 of the grants on the list. You've got a list of all the current grants on the back of your packet. 3 of those were renewed with conditions. The first was for SEI, and that reimbursement is to be prorated for the number of kids that they're able to reach in foster care for their foster care grant. Human Solutions after-school program for homeless youth was being delivered in a shelter site that was subsequently closed, and they were looking for a permanent site at a hotel, and Multnomah County was involved in negotiations to get that site. So we agreed to renew the grant provided they have a site for their services next year. I just was in the interim between the allocation committee meeting and coming here, notified that they have got that lease. So that shelter is going to open at a permanent site, and we will go forward with that program as planned, if you all approve that. And then finally, the Pathfinder Network was given a conditional renewal for an after-school program being delivered in several school sites. They had a lot of startup issues in their first year. They're doing much better this year in reaching their goals, and if they reach the goals this year, they will go ahead and be renewed if you all approve that. So those are the conditional renewals. All of the grants were renewed at the current budget level plus 3.9% COLA. So all those amounts that are represented on that form, that's current service level. No service levels were changed except for the conditional one that I just talked about. Is there any questions on either the process or any of the specific grants before we tell you about, show you some great photos and quotes from people?
Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you so much for your report. This is my first opportunity to actually take a dive into the Portland Children's Levy, so forgive me if my questions seem out of left field.
Okay. I'll do my best to answer.
Thank you. One of my questions is really about whether or not there's been any audits of the Portland Children's Levy since its inception.
We have a financial audit every year to assure that we are under that 5% cap for administrative costs. So that's a financial levy. There was an audit conducted by the city auditor several years back. But all of those audits are up on our website, so they're publicly available.
And so when was the last time that was done?
I want to say 4 years ago, but I'm not positive on the date.
So we're probably time for another one. How many of these programs have been funded since the inception of the Children's Levy? And how many are new innovative programs?
Well, the levy is required by law to invest in proven programs, and so I would say innovation hasn't really necessarily been its focus. Funding innovative programs hasn't so much been its focus. I could get you a list of programs that have had funding from the inception, and then programs have been added at the different. So we run a competitive round every time the levy's been renewed. This is now the 4th renewal. So every time there have been new programs that have been added, and there have been some programs that were funded again. So I could, depending on how you want to see that information broken down, I could certainly get you that. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Yes, I'd be very interested in knowing actually who's benefiting from the resources that we're investing in these programs demographically, right? I know that there are some programs that are specific to racial, ethnic communities that are easy to identify from this list, but I'm not quite sure who's benefiting from, say, programs that whether it's Albina Head Start or Hacienda CDC. Maybe I know Hacienda, but let's say Mount Hood Community College. And is there an expectation that equity is being considered in your granting decisions?
Absolutely. That's part of both the processes I just described, the community engagement and process improvement. We're very much focused on that for our next round. It's been a focus for a while. We publish a lengthy report that gives you all of the demographic information on who's served in the programs that are funded. About 70% of pretty consistently for the last 5 years, 70% of the kids who are participating in the programs that we fund are kids of color. The breakdown by race and ethnicity in detail is in that report. We fund about 33% of the resources of the total dollars that are invested in culturally specific organizations or programs. That isn't to say that there are many mainstream organizations that also serve children of color. So does that give you some sense? I would be happy to give you more sense or I could be happy to meet with you and go through the report.
That gives me some sense, but I am very interested in actually who benefits, because clearly if we're all paying for it, I just want to make sure that the reach of these resources are reflective of, I know it's proven programs, and I say that with a quote, but proven by who, for who, I think is the bigger question, right? Because I'll just leave it there. Thank you. Appreciate your input.
Okay. Any other questions?
Very good. Does that complete your presentation?
If we have a few slides from
Yeah,
the,
go for it.
this is from the,
Great.
so every year we do a community report, which is more focused on the programs themselves and the stories of the people in those programs, and sort of who are we reaching and how have they benefited from the programs. So we publish all the data and the numbers, and then we also do this. So I was going to tell you some of the stories that are in this year's report. This year's report was a focus on folks who have been, kind of to your point, Commissioner Hardesty, folks who are in programs that we have been funded for a long haul. So some of the people on these slides are now in high school or are young adults, or not even so young adults, who participated in levy-funded programs sometimes as long as 15 years ago. So the first young man you see and pictured here is Richard. He participated in Albina early Head Start program starting at age 2 and continued on in the program, at the Head Start program at Albina. Both of those programs support parents in meeting their children's needs, which in Richard's case included living with cerebral palsy. High-quality early learning and family support helped his parents meet his special needs. He's now a high school student and shared his dream in the report, so his quote is around to one day live independently. And his mom joined the staff at Albina Head Start and is now a lead home visitor there. She's worked there for 9 years. In Serenity's words, that's his mom, she said, "It's kind of a way to give back what was given to me." So I think it speaks volumes when you see people who participate in programs then become employed in those programs and stay with them, speaks volumes to what they do in the community. Next is in Child Abuse Prevention and Intervention Program. This is Kristen and her 2 sons. She participated in the Insights ECHO program when she lost custody of her first son while experiencing domestic violence. The ECHO program provides intensive home visiting services for parents seeking to reunify their children that are in DHS custody. She credits this program and others along with it with helping her to regain custody of her first child and learn the parenting skills she needed to parent both of her sons. The sons you see pictured there are now 8 and 11, and she's got a job at a nonprofit and is working toward a BA in psychology. So you kind of see the longevity. This was many years ago that she participated when that first child was a baby. Next slide is for an after-school program, which is... Okay, yeah, sorry, I guess I got out of order here. The young man that you see pictured there, his name is David. He participated in an open school step-up program as a 9th grader and still remembers attending the summer leadership camp that preceded the beginning of high school and tries to create a bond between the advocate staff and the youth that they're going to serve. Step Up helped him focus on his academics and eventually apply to college. This man was selected as a Gates Millennium Scholar, attended University of Miami and graduated, and then attended the University of Portland for a graduate degree. He chose to return to Portland to live and is now a teacher at Roosevelt High School. And in his words, Step Up made the impossible possible. I felt really cared for, like being in a community. And that program is, again, a program that you are renewing funding for today if you approve it. The next slide is FEMA, who participated in a program called College Possible. She is currently about to receive her degree from the University of Oregon in about a month and a half after participating in College Possible 6 years ago. She'll head to Memphis after graduation to work for Teach for America. This young woman was born in a refugee camp in Kenya and came to Portland when she was 9. By the time she got to David Douglas High School, she had set her sights on college and enrolled in College Possible in her sophomore year. The near-peer mentors, so recent college graduates, helped her navigate all the standardized testing, the applications, the essays, all the things that are required for college. College Possible focuses on coaching and mentoring and supporting first-generation college students to navigate the admissions process and supports them when they enter college, so carries through into the college years. Famous says her, quote, long-term goal is to open a nonprofit for Somali and other Muslim young girls to empower them and let them be their own person. So there's a little sampling of the folks who are benefiting and have benefited over that long haul. So when people ask about the impact of the Children's Levy over time, these are the examples that we point to. That's the end of the presentation. Any other questions or concerns?
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I'm curious, how big is your staff?
We have 5.25 FTE.
And how diverse is your staff?
Not diverse at all. We're all white.
Huh. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Very good. Thank you. Is there a public testimony on this item? This is an ordinance.
No one signed up.
Very good. Any further discussions, comments, questions? Please call the roll.
Fish,
Well, thank you for an excellent and very succinct presentation. And I look forward next year to learning more about how you're recasting the grant-making process and how that's going to evolve. And Mayor, given your schedule and all the other things you're doing, I'm not quite sure where you find the time to chair this body, but kudos to you for taking that on. I'm pleased to vote aye.
Hardesty?
Thank you very much for the report. It's an interesting report to try to wrap your head around. I know the community has invested quite a bit of money to make opportunities available for many folks who are finding it hard to have opportunity. I think that I want more information about how these dollars are invested, how we're using an equity lens to determine what works and what doesn't work. And I am disappointed to hear that in how many years, 12 years now? How long has this been around? About 10, 12 years? That we still have an all-white staff making decisions about communities. That's really disappointing. And so I'm just going to vote no, even though I know it will pass, just to make sure that I have a marker in for next year.
Udaly?
Thank you for the presentation. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for this report. It's good to know how taxpayers' money is being spent to do good things in the community. Thank you to the Levy Allocation Committee members. It's Mayor Wheeler for the City Council, Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega-Peterson, Mitch Hornecker, who is the business community representative, Felicia Tripp-Folsom, the community member appointed by the county board, and Julie Young, the community member appointed by the city council. And they're the ones, of course, that make these recommendations to us that Director Pellegrino has brought. So thank you very much for that recommendation. Of course, we have to thank former Commissioner Dan Saltzman, who's been a champion for this program. I have to say I particularly enjoyed the story about the step-up parent. My son's first job after graduating from teacher training from Lewis and Clark during the recession, there weren't any regular jobs going, so he got a part-time job as a step-up coordinator working at Marshall High School. And I remember his first task was making phone calls to families before that week before school to remind them that their child was invited to go. And there was one particular phone call I can still remember where his end of the conversation was calling to remind you that Brittany needs to be at school by 9 o'clock tomorrow. No, it's tomorrow, it's not Saturday. And then, so this student was able to get to this formative week just because that phone call had been made to make sure that the parent was on the same page, because the parent was also very wanting to get the child to the program. So that's just an example of public dollars can make a lot of good, and sometimes it's in very small ways, sometimes it's in very huge ways. And so thank you for all of those stories. Aye.
Wheeler?
Can you confirm that this requires unanimous consent?
Yes, Mayor.
I vote no. The ordinance fails. I ask for a motion for reconsideration.
I move to reconsider.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second to reconsider. Please call the roll.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. So to be clear, now it's being reconsidered. Colleagues, this requires unanimous consent, given that it is an emergency item. Please call the roll on the ordinance up for
So you're removing the
reconsideration.
emergency-
And I will
Commissioner
just,
Fritz.
we're not allowed to abstain. We are allowed to leave the chamber to note disagreement with a vote. So I appreciate the point of order that's been called.
Please call the roll.
Fish?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
I think Commissioner Hardesty raised a valid point, both in terms of the composition of the staff as well as the composition of the committee itself. She is correct that the Children's Levy does do tremendous work with diverse communities throughout the city of Portland, and I very much respect the report you gave today, and I respect the work that you've done. I think it's fantastic, but I also do want to acknowledge that all of us should strive to be more inclusive and diverse in terms of how we address the community. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you for your report. Appreciate it. Next item is an interesting one. The Justice Center elevators, this is a 4/5 item. This was on the Tuesday memo, 412-1.
Council to convene as, I'm sorry, wrong one.
It's all right.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder and provide for payment for the Justice Center Elevator Modernization Project for an estimated $1,570,910.
Now, Jana, Commissioner
I
Fritz.
just need to ask the city attorney, does it have to be the same for people who signed the 4/5 that hear this case?
I do not believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Good, because we don't want to hear it again.
Well, should we acknowledge Hardesty coming back in or not?
I'm assuming she'll work her way down.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Jana Giroux, and I am a construction manager for the Facilities Capital Projects team of organization, or the Office of Management and Finance. That would be OMF, not OMG, by the way. And we are in the process of getting ready to do a major modernization of the Justice Center elevators that are on the city of Portland's side. So they service the police, and they are also used to transport defendants and also criminals. So in regards to the Justice Center and how this elevator process has gone, these elevators were put in place when the building was constructed in 1982. There was a modernization that was a minor modernization in 2006. So since that time, we've had a variety of problems that are affecting both the safety and the security of the elevators, mainly motorized problems. So we had an assessment in 2016 that was a minor assessment and found it to be functional and thought that we would have another 5 to 10 years. 2 years later, they're having enough problems that they have people even not riding the elevators because of concerns, not that they're not working, but just that they're either slow or we've had some stoppage. So we did a further assessment in the fall, and this recommendation was for a full modernization, which mostly will be located on the functional parts. So that's where we're at right now. That's what the budget is for. And again, we would ask for your support. Okay.
Very good. Any questions, discussion, public testimony on this item, Carla?
Maggie and Charles had signed up yesterday, but I don't think they're here today.
I didn't see either. I don't see Maggie, and I do not see Charles. One moment. They're going back to the videotape. Are we good?
Yeah.
Please call the roll.
Fish,
Aye.
Hardesty, I'm sorry, Udaly,
Aye.
Fritz,
I actually got stuck in these elevators when chaperoning a third grade field trip. It was horrible.
Really?
Aye.
Oh, what a great moment.
Wheeler,
That may be the best reason I've ever heard for voting for anything here. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you
And
very
I
much.
apologize for that.
It was a long
What a
time.
safe place to stay.
I'm over it. I'm over it.
All right, and then our last item for today, thank you all for your patience for this, item 413, please, time certain item.
need to switch out clerks here, just a moment. No. In this order, right? Mayor last.
I am now convening the Prosper Portland Budget Committee for the purpose of receiving the budget message. The Budget Committee members received copies of the budget on Friday, May 3rd. I now request Pam Feigenboots to call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fritz,
Here.
Fish,
Here?
Hardesty, Udaly,
Here.
Mayor Wheeler.
Here, I'd like to now welcome Chair Cruz and Executive Director Branham to make their presentation. Thank you.
By the way, I just want to note that on page 3 of your excellent report. Bobby Lee is listed as Director of Economic Development. And today I saw on my Twitter feed a picture of him. Apparently, he's moonlighting as some aide to the mayor of another city. So I just want to put that on the record as an issue of concern.
We miss Bobby.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. I'm Tavo Cruz, Chair of the Prosper Portland Board of Commissioners. We are pleased to be here this afternoon to present our fiscal year 2019 to 2020 proposed budget for your consideration. Since we reviewed the requested budget with Council on April 1st, staff have continued to engage community members on specific TIF district budgets. Those conversations help to inform the implementation of action plans and the 5-year forecast that is included in this proposed budget document. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank the staff and community partners involved in the preparation of this budget, which includes 29 unique budgets for each fund. It is quite an undertaking. During this year's budget process, the board prioritized funds for Portland Means Progress, the Inclusive Business Resource Network, Mercatus, and My People's Market, happening June 1st at the U.S. Postal Service site, so we hope you'll join us there, as well as continued support for community-led efforts such as the Hill Block. We appreciate Mayor Wheeler's ongoing support and inclusion of these priorities in our proposed budget. I am proud of the agency's work, and I look forward to strengthening our collaborative efforts with public, private, and community partners as we build an economy that benefits all Portlanders. I would now like to hand the presentation over to Executive Director Branham and Director of Development and Investment, Lisa Abwaf. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cruz. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. I'm Kimberly Branham, Executive Director of Prosper Portland. And Tony Barnes, our Finance Manager, is joining us here. He's put together a lot of the information, so I want to appreciate and note that he is here to answer questions. I am going to, we're pleased to be here to present our agency's proposed budget for your consideration, and this presentation is intended to be a complement to our earlier work sessions with you, which were primarily focused on the city general funds and other non-tax increment finance resources. The majority of this afternoon's presentation will focus on priorities supported through our tax increment finance districts. So I'm going to focus my presentation on the strategic direction, the budget process, and our resource context, and then Lisa Abwaf, our Director of Development and Investment, is going to provide an overview of each tax increment finance district, and we'll make sure to leave plenty of time for questions and discussions throughout. I want to make one note just about terminology. You'll hear us using tax increment finance district or TIF instead of urban renewal. While legally speaking, we still do administer urban renewal areas and urban renewal funds. Urban renewal is a loaded term and comes from practices in the early 1900s that were primarily focused on bulldozing communities and using eminent domain. Tax increment finance, by contrast, is a tool that employs future property tax proceeds and can be used for many different purposes. So you'll hear us using tax increment finance district intentionally to make sure that we're clear that we're not actually performing urban renewal. So our 2015 to 2020 strategic plan establishes our priority of creating widely shared prosperity. To deliver on this plan, we harness our agency's core business lines. In gray, you'll see on the slide business development and technical assistance, community capacity building and workforce training, and commercial and mixed-use investing to achieve 5 objectives. Increasing access to quality employment, especially in middle wage sectors, supporting wealth creation amongst people of color and people in low incomes through business and development ventures, developing capacity and creating strong partnerships to address our most pressing challenges, and supporting the health and vitality of neighborhoods across Portland, and of course, being effective and equitable stewards of public resources. In today's presentation, we will be spending a good deal of time talking about our commercial and mixed-use investments, and so sort of the green, purple, and gray portion of our strategic plan.
Kimberly, can I just get a clarity on something? Today, you're walking us through Prosper Portland's budget. Tonight, you're walking through just the general fund portion, is that correct?
So tonight is just a public hearing, but it's a public hearing on both our general fund and our TIF budget.
Oh, it's both.
It's both.
To be clear, this is the opening of the budget meeting on the
Yes.
Prosper budget, and then at the end of this session, I'm going to continue the hearing to tonight for the public hearing portion
Yes.
of this.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then we'll vote on it along with the rest of the budget.
Great, okay. So in the last year, we have produced significant results towards achieving our strategic plan goals. As you'll see on the slide in front of you, we've increased access to high-quality employment, helping to support the creation of more than 3,000 jobs and another 374 employment connections through business development, industry initiatives, and e-zone support and workforce navigation. We've advanced wealth creation for people of color and people in East Portland, supporting diverse long-term property owners and business owners to stabilize or increase the competitiveness of their business interests. We awarded $1.6 million, for example, in grants through our Prosperity Investment Program, with 65% of resources awarded to people of color. Over the past 2 years, 25% of our contracting dollars in projects in which we have invested have been performed by certified firms, and 13.4% have gone to minority business enterprise or disadvantaged business enterprise certified firms. We've supported access to healthy, complete neighborhoods and implemented new tools in response to rising commercial rates across the city. Through the Commercial Affordability Tenanting Program, we now have 40,000 square feet of over 40,000 square feet of ground floor retail space in Alberta Commons, Lentz Commons, Oliver Station, and 10th and Yamhill that will be made available at below market rates. We've also partnered with the Portland Housing Bureau on projects to create hundreds of new affordable housing units in Lentz and North Macadam. And finally, we've endeavored to be effective stewards of public resources and continue to evolve as an organization. Our financial programs have leveraged $6 from the private sector for each dollar we've invested. So this budget before you intends to continue the work as we enter into the last year of our strategic plan. The Prosper Portland Budget Advisory Committee for the fiscal year 1920 budget development process included a mix of geographic-focused constituents, a member of the Council for Economic and Racial Equity, traded sector industry groups, entrepreneurship organizations, educational partners, and community economic development partners. The Budget Advisory Committee met 4 times over the course of the budget season and provided incredibly valuable input. But they also said that it was hard to get through our budget in just 4 settings, even though they were 3 hours each. And so we will be working to engage our Budget Advisory Committee on a year-round basis going forward, acknowledging the fact that there are 20-plus funds, and so it is really valuable to have members of the public who are able to dig deep into our budget. While the charge of the Budget Advisory Committee is to more broadly focus on how the budget delivers on our strategic priorities, we also know that there are geographically based constituencies with particular interest in particular TIF budgets. So as we have done for the past few years, we've complemented the Budget Advisory Committee process with outreach to business and neighborhood associations listed on the slide above. We've also incorporated the input that we've heard from these community members by, for example, restoring full funding to loan matching programs in the Interstate District to support eligible Prosperity Investment Program grant recipients. We were asked to consider bringing forth a recommendation to extend the life of the Gateway Regional Center TIF district, given that they are not planning to reach maximum indebtedness. So we'll be coming back based on that feedback as well. The next slide provides a quick snapshot of our overall budget. Of the $372 million in resources this year, we anticipate up to $159 million in total expenditures from Prosper Portland. There's an additional $60 million with the Portland Housing Bureau intends to deploy towards affordable housing projects. 90% of our resources come from existing cash balance in TIF districts and new TIF funds that will be issued next year, with program income, general funds, community development block grant dollars, and enterprise zone funds making the difference. While it seems like a small percent, the non-TIF funds make up nearly a third of our operating budget. To support this work, we employ a total of 90 FTE and, full-time equivalents and limited term equivalent staff, with staff levels for our three largest external facing departments noted on the slide.
Director Random, can I just ask you
Please.
a question? I'm just looking at the resource column.
Yes.
If we could keep that up for a second. How do you get a third of your resources as non-TIF?
So it's if you divide our capital budget with our operating budget, so our operating budget is round about $30 million a year. Tony can give the details. So we have about a third of that, so about $10 million of non-TIF resources that we deploy for our economic development programs, staffing associated with that, and other programs that are really more on the operational side. The other resources go into capital improvement programs and projects, so major development programs.
And so is just a little preview of your next strategic plan, is your goal to get that percentage even higher of non-TIF funds for your operating budget so you become more sustainable?
Absolutely.
As TIF declines as a
Yes.
resource?
Yes, we hope through our financial sustainability plan to be able to be really reliant on other funding sources to make up the gap and to get to $30 million in operating funds.
Thank you.
Thank you. So breaking down into what the $159 million would be invested in, at a high level, about $115 million is planned for investment in property redevelopment. So major investments that you'll hear more about include the post office and Broadway corridor, ongoing investment in Old Town Chinatown Action Plan, and investing over $13 million in property investment program grants. Approximately $16 million is available for economic development purposes, which include both general fund programming and business finance lending in TIF districts, as well as other non-TIF resources. And finally, about $11 million is dedicated towards infrastructure, which includes, in this budget, Leach Botanical Gardens and Sullivan's Pedestrian Bridge, among others. So just for the general public, this is a map that shows 16 active districts. 4 of these districts identified in blue are active plans but have reached their last date to issue debt. So the only resources that they have are resources that have in the district are generating income. The 6 districts shown in gold are active districts that continue to issue new tax increment finance debt proceeds, and those proceeds are included in our budget and 5-year forecast. And then the final 6 districts are neighborhood prosperity initiative districts. These districts are much smaller in scale and are noted in green on the slide. All right, so this chart has a lot of information all condensed into one. It illustrates the maximum indebtedness, so max amount by law that we are allowed to borrow within each of the TIF districts. And it shows how much has been issued so far. So what you see in dark gray has already been issued. What you see in green is what's still available and anticipated to be accessed. All districts are anticipated to reach maximum indebtedness based on their financial capacity, with the exception of Gateway, which we anticipate will come about $64 million short of the legal limit for that district. South Park Blocks did not reach maximum indebtedness when the final date to issue debt occurred in 2008. Finally, the dates show for each district the last date to issue debt, as well as when the districts will be defeased, so that is when all the bonds are expected to pay off. Airport Way is the first district that will be defeased, which is in June of 2020, and the last district to defease, as currently anticipated, is Gateway in 2030. Let's leave that for 1 second, just in case there are questions about that. Okay. We can come back to that if there are additional questions. So moving on to the affordable housing set-aside. Since the set-aside policy update in 2015, which increased the affordable housing set-aside from 30% to 45% on a go-forward basis, through this fiscal year, $142 million have been spent or allocated, which is 39% of eligible TIF resources. Central East Side, Gateway, and to a lesser extent, River District and North Macadam are trending below the target, but these resources are programmed to expend in the 5-year forecast to the housing set aside. And so we anticipate that we know that we will meet the targets as identified in the column to the right. Altogether, between 2006, which is the beginning of the set-aside, and 2025, a total of $540 million in new TIF resources will have been spent on affordable housing. All right, so 2 more contextual slides. Our board also wanted to ensure that the budget aligned with the high-level financial sustainability plan that Commissioner Fish mentioned will be implemented over the next 10 years. When fully implemented, we hope to be able to maintain a $30 million per year operating budget and backfill for the reduction in TIF funding. In the immediate term, our priority really is to pursue and adopt an impact investment approach for the remaining tax increment finance funds and existing real estate assets, meaning that we are optimizing both our public benefits and our financial return to return a blended rate that is consistent with our values and informed by market performance. So throughout the presentation, you'll see donuts that have these different colors, and here's what they mean. Represented in green, you have grants and infrastructure, which require extremely high levels of public benefit, and there's no repayment or return. Over the 5-year period, this represents 20% of planned investment and 27% through the 10-year plan. Program-related investments are those which also produce significant levels of public benefit and where we anticipate repayment with a modest return that is below market rate. That represents 50% of our planned investment over the next 5 years and 44% through the next 10 years. Mission-related investments also meet all of our policy objectives and have an anticipated repayment and market rate of an average of 6% return. Over the 5-year budget forecast, we've allotted $91 million, or 30% of TIF budgets towards these investments. This includes Broadway Corridor, the ODOT blocks in the Central East Side, and the Oregon Convention Center TIF District. All right, and finally, the next slide shows breaking down the investment categories by tax increment finance district. We can see how the relative investment programming works. Neighborhood districts are primarily program-related, so below market returns with additional grant and infrastructure investments as shown in blue. Most central city districts are currently programmed with more of a mixture of investments. So River District, Downtown Waterfront, and the Oregon Convention Center are programmed with higher amounts of mission-related investments where we anticipate more market-level returns with some of the projects moving forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa to dig into each of the TIF districts.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I'm
Afternoon.
Lisa Aboif. I'm the Director of Development and Investment, and the first 4 TIF districts that we'll walk you through each have an action plan. So we spent multiple years working with the community, and they each have a 5-year action plan, and they're in various years of the life cycle of those action plans. But they're pretty robust, including the North-Northeast Development Initiative that has about $32 million of non-housing set-aside TIF investments for placement, which are guided by the 2017 initiative plan that we worked on with the community, as well as the North-Northeast Oversight Committee, which is a committee of community members that meets monthly and where we report out our activities and investments in this area. The plan was developed with some significant community input, and kind of its primary focus is really on fostering economic prosperity amongst African Americans and people of color within North-Northeast. And what that looks like when we go to place investments is supporting businesses, longtime property owners, and anchor community nonprofits. Recent accomplishments that kind of showcase some of that work is the completion of the Alberta Commons project, as well as the community-based affordable commercial tenanting at Alberta Commons that Kimberly mentioned earlier. 82% of the construction at Alberta Commons and the tenant improvements that we made to support the businesses was performed by disadvantaged business enterprises and MWESBs, with 67% of those construction dollars going to DBE and MBE firms. We're pleased to announce Champions Barbershop, one of the tenants at Alberta Commons, opened in April. We anticipate Greenhouse is scheduled to open shortly, and Cason's Fine Meats will open later this summer. And over the past 2 years, we've served approximately 50 businesses throughout the area and longtime property owners with what we call our Prosperity Investment Program, grant program, with 90% of those grant dollars and those businesses and longtime property owners being people of color. Next slide. So as we look forward, we feel like we've made really strong progress in supporting small businesses and long-term property owners. And this year, we'd really like to focus on the pipeline for larger scale property development loan projects, as well as what's called a cultural business hub. It will likely occur through a competitive bid so that there are opportunities for community members to make offerings. We'll also continue to work with the Portland Housing Bureau, where we complement their dollars to provide down payment assistance and home ownership support programs to a broader range of income levels of folks living in North Northeast or desiring to return to North Northeast. And we'll continue to coordinate with our oversight committee on all of our activities and investments. So the next area will go.
Lisa,
Yeah.
can you just go back one
Sure.
slide?
Yeah.
I'm looking at page 45 of your report, and the one thing I can't really discern is the amount of unencumbered resources. So how do I look at your budget and determine how much is available for future projects that aren't in the pipeline?
It's a great question. We have kind of an interpretive budget that we share with our Budget Advisory Committee that shows that in a color-coded way. So we would be happy to share that with you and also probably should post it. I think it's posted on our website.
I'd love to see
Yeah.
the piece for Interstate, and let me be very transparent.
Sure.
My predecessor at Parks launched a process with the community around the future of the Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center. We have received an interim report that contains a range of options, some of which are sort of go big and look at redeveloping the whole site. Now, the site has Trillium, a charter school to the north, has Patton Park to the south, and has a decommissioned Water Bureau tank just behind it. In order for us to really evaluate all the options, we need to have a robust partnership with Prosper Portland. And one of the things we're interested in learning is, in any of your economic development and housing initiatives, does this particular part of Interstate fit in as an opportunity area? Do you have resources that might be available in the future over the next 5 years? And then, of course, does Prosper Portland and equally important, the council have an appetite to look at investing in the next chapter of IFCC? So the document you're going to supply to me gives me a sense of what some of those unallocated resources are going forward.
Yeah.
Adina Long will be talking to you about sort of some preliminary recommendations we've received and how we might pursue them. And Mayor, I think at some point, we may sit down with you and others to talk about, does IFCC fit within the vision for investments in IFCC? And I think particularly because the goal is to have a culturally appropriate, culturally centered landmark structure, whether it's the existing fire station or as part of a new development. We're going to want to know whether this is an opportunity worth pursuing. So just wanted to preview that.
Yep.
And it's a dynamic conversation, and frankly, we'll be looking to you to see whether it fits into your 5 or 10-year vision for Interstate.
Thank you, Commissioner. We look forward to those conversations. We, as Lisa mentioned, have a great advisory body who will also bring in to those conversations when appropriate. So thank you.
So similar to the North Northeast community, Gateway has a 5-year action plan that guides approximately $35 million of non-set-aside TIF resources that we have available in the Gateway TIF District. And the plan is about 3 years in now. It was adopted in July 2016. And the plan actually focuses on 3 geographic areas and divides up kind of those resources from a goals perspective across the Halsey-Weidler-Couplet area, the Gateway Transit Center area, and then what's called Central District, which runs from around 102nd and Burnside south to Mall 205. Our early focus, as you'll see in our accomplishments, has really been on the Halsey-Weidler couplet. Over the past 2 years, we've served approximately 10 gateway businesses, primarily along that couplet, with our Prosperity Investment Grant Program, with 60% of those grants going to people of color-owned businesses or property owners. We've also partnered with the Office of Transportation on the Halsey-Weidler Streetscape projects that just started this past year, with the goal of improving safety, operations, and multimodal access along the couplet. We've also partnered with the Parks Department by providing land and investment in the Gateway Discovery Park, which had its grand opening last August. And through our community livability grant programs, we've been able to support really significant community nonprofits like ERCO's Africa House throughout the Gateway area. Next slide, please. So looking forward, we're both looking to kind of to complete the investments that we've been making in Halsey-Weidler, as well as starting to look at the other 2 key areas that were called out to us by the community. We are partnering with the Housing Bureau as well as Human Solutions on a new mixed-use project intended to go adjacent to the park at 106 in Halsey. It will create it'll be a very important component to creating vitality within the park, particularly through the ground floor retail. The project will bring new residents and businesses, and I would just flag, we are bringing this before our board here in the next month or 2. We do anticipate it will be a mixed income project. The unit count has shifted, and so you may hear something about this from the community this evening. It has shifted, and we have added an additional 12 units of affordable housing, moving away from being market rate housing. The shift was actually caused because one of the new market tax credit investors in that project stepped out of the project. And one of the ways that we could keep our commitment to keeping this project going and the important role that it will play for the park and the community was to reassign 12 units from market rate to affordable housing. The project will also include about 10,000 square feet for Human Solutions. Their new office will be located there, and there will also be around 11,000 square feet of retail that Kimberly mentioned in terms of our commercial affordability project that will face onto Halsey as well as the park. We do anticipate also moving forward on the other 2 community nodes highlighted in the action plan. First, we are working with the Office of Transportation in their discussions with the property owners and developers about a local improvement district at 97th and Burnside. And we have also been working with David Douglas School District, Mount Hood Community College, and other institutional and community partners on the potential for an education and economic development focused project at the Gateway Transit Center. Next slide. In LENTS, our investments are similarly guided by a 5-year action plan that is kind of coming to the end of the 5 years. It was adopted in May 2014. Similar to Gateway, it really called for focused investments in the LENTS Town Center area along the commercial corridors of Foster, 82nd, and 122nd, and then kind of area-wide for affordable housing, industrial, and open space investments. Our early investments focused on the LENTS Town Center area, and we've been investing there in close partnership with the Portland Housing Bureau. What we call our Phase 1 projects involved about $50 million of investment between Prosper Portland and the Portland Housing Bureau, which created over 260 new housing units at the town center, and included 205 of those units were affordable or income restricted, or 80% of the units. In addition to 3 residential projects that the Phase 1 included, it also included the new 30,000 square foot Asian Health Services building, which opened in August of last year. Collectively, the construction of those projects has achieved a 26% business equity goal, with 21% of those dollars performed by MBE and DBE firms. We've partnered with the Office of Transportation on the Foster Transportation Streetscape project, which just launched this past year, which, similar to the Halsey-Weidler project, intends to improve safety within the community through road reconstruction, upgraded traffic signals, crosswalks, et cetera. And to ensure that the businesses were really stable in preparation for construction as well as new investment, we've spent quite a bit of time reaching out to businesses and property owners along the Foster commercial corridor, and have supported 20 small businesses, with 50% of those businesses being people of color owned. So looking forward in LENTS, similar to Gateway, we do have one significant remaining parcel that is located in LENTS Town Center area. It's what we call 92nd and Herald and the Bakery Blocks. It's what folks affectionately known as the LENTS location for the goats. Based on community input that we've been conducting over the past fiscal year, we anticipate the development to continue to build on Phase 1 and provide a mix of income units to the community, as well as new affordable commercial space and a plaza that will help provide a long-term home for the LENTS international market. And we will also continue to support small businesses, community anchors, and nonprofits through our grant programs, as well as through more significant investments, such as the ones that we've made in Leach Botanical Gardens.
Lisa, what's on Foster, what's the western border of the URA?
Oh, that's a good
Do you go to,
It goes pretty far. I think there's a tail that goes to, right, I mean, like, I think kind of the significant portion of it probably goes to around 60th.
For some reason.
And then the tail goes down.
it goes to about
50th.
60th, so that's how it picks up the Mercado.
Yeah.
And I just want to let you know that at 64th and Foster, there's the Laurelwood Park,
Yes.
Yes.
which just recently, we've decided to greenlight
Yes.
some investment of SDC money
Yeah.
to begin to renovate that park. So that will be, that's now in the heart of things if the district goes
Yeah.
to 60th. And there's a lot of commercial activity around there, so we think the timing is good to make that investment to support the other things that are happening along Foster.
That's great, thank you.
And then the last component I would just call out, because I think it will be really important, particularly for the community. The picture you see in the lower left is known as the Phoenix Pharmacy, and we've been working with the long-term property owner there for probably about 3 years. And we're excited to say that they are looking at doing the seismic retrofit that will be necessary for that building to come back into community and active use. So the final area that we have an action plan for is the Old Town Chinatown area. In Old Town Chinatown, our investments have focused, there were 3 primary goals of the action plan that included neighborhood vitality, district management, and supporting businesses within that community. We are in the 5th year of the action plan, and we do anticipate coming back with the community to council as well as our board with a request to extend the action plan. And I think we see a lot of similarities to their original goals on the action plan, as well as new goals and kind of a double down effort, particularly around seismic and district parking. Next slide. In total, our commitment of 57 million, we've spent about 4 or 5 million, and so there's a significant amount of resources remaining to spend to date. Where we have seen success is the original action plan had a goal for 500 new moderate income housing units. About 250 of those units have now been built or renovated through the 38 Davis project, the project on Southwest 3rd that's currently under construction, and via the renovation of the Erickson Fritz. The action plan also had a goal of rehabilitating 5 buildings to address some of the seismic challenges and historic renovation opportunities of the district. To date, we've invested in the rehabilitation of the Overland Warehouse, Society Hotel, that has become a really important community contributor in the area, PNCA, Pine Street Market, and Hoxton Hotel, amongst others. And 24% of the construction of the Hoxton Hotel was performed by MWESB and DBE businesses, with about half of that performed by DBE and MBE contractors. Over the past 2 years, we've also invested and focused our investment in small businesses in Old Town, and we've seen over 50% of those grants supporting people of color-owned businesses. We've also seen new jobs brought to the district, which was another goal of the action plan. Of particular note is some tech companies choosing to locate their headquarters in Portland in Old Town, as well as the opening of the Gladys McCoy Health Department, which brings over 300 new employees to the community. And finally, we've invested our community livability grants in a very targeted fashion, including working with anchors like Lansu Chinese Garden, as well as supporting new community institutions like the Portland Chinatown History Museum, which just opened in 2018.
Can I just ask, to what extent is it a priority for Prosper Portland to help the Lanzhou Chinese Garden acquire the lot to the north to open the door to possibly an expansion of their footprint in the future?
I think we feel like it's a priority that they are able to acquire the property. We've had some productive conversations with the board of Lanzhou. There are a number of competing priorities, and so we would need to be a partner in that, in supporting the acquisition, particularly because we've just now put out a request for proposals for a property adjacent to that and at 4th and Burnside. And so I think we are interested in supporting that project. We know it's a community priority. We'll need to dig into the details, but we want to see it move forward.
Thank you.
So as we look forward, we anticipate continuing a lot of the work that has occurred over the past 5 years. For example, we're working with the Nikkei Legacy Center, which is one of the remaining cultural organizations in Old Town that continues to lease. And as investments continue to grow, we want to make sure that they can stay in the community. So we are supporting their efforts to purchase a space that we currently own at Northwest 4th and Flanders, which would give them a permanent home and a home in the center of what was the historic Japanese American community. We're also working with community-based stakeholder group regarding the development of 4th and Burnside, as well as Block 25, which is immediately adjacent to the block that Commissioner Fish mentioned. And we anticipate that those developments will focus both on bringing new vitality to the community, as well as honoring the community's distinct Chinese American and Japanese American history. So the next couple of slides address our investments in the River District Tax Increment District. So in addition to approximately $18 million that we have committed to Old Town Chinatown in the River District budget, we have a number of other priorities, and we'll touch on some of the most significant ones. Over the past year, I think as kind of many folks are familiar with, we've been working with a community-based steering committee and with a focus on racial equity to identify community priorities and develop a master plan for the Broadway corridor or post office site. And yesterday, with the support of the steering committee, results of a community-based survey, and input from all of the infrastructure bureaus that are represented here, our board approved a preferred concept called Play. The concept would extend the park blocks 2 blocks into the post office site. It identifies about 2 half-block parcels that would be owned by the Portland Housing Bureau to ensure affordable housing and mixed-income housing on site. And it also provides for connections east to Union Station and to the north of the site, as well as to Old Town Chinatown and to the east side via the Green Loop. Over the past year, the post office has moved all of their functions out of that location, and when we think about our asset management obligations, this is certainly the most significant one that we are thinking about, as property management and all security obligations moved over to us over the past year. We're in active negotiations with the post office to identify a new retail location for them to go into that satisfies their needs, and this is a critical next step because we can't move forward with the demolition of that building until a new retail location has been agreed to. And when you look at the River District budget, you'll see that there is a very significant cost to us on an annual basis to keep that building up and running.
So is the retail currently operating there still?
It is.
But just none of the sorting or anything?
Yeah, exactly.
That was another of the field trips that I've done, is behind the scenes there.
Where they could watch the people sorting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And as part of our community conversations, we're also making sure that our contracting community and our diverse contracting community is aware of the demolition opportunity that will be upcoming in the next couple of years, as well as environmental cleanup. Next slide. So in the coming fiscal year, we anticipate submitting for approval the required land use master plan coming off of the selection of the preferred concept. We do anticipate meeting with Design Commission this summer, and we'll continue to kind of work with bureaus as well as council offices to identify priority public infrastructure improvements as well as investments. And with master plan review, we'll also begin negotiating a community benefit agreement and a development agreement with our partners. I would call out kind of one of the most important items to note that we have talked about with our board in the River District budget is that we now have better costs around management, maintenance, demolition, cleanup, as well as the infrastructure that will be required for the site. And what you'll see is that we are currently in a negative balance in the River District in out years. You'll see those costs showing up in the real estate management line items, pre-development, as well as redevelopment line items in the River District budget. And we've discussed options with our board to address that gap, which include optimizing income from the parking garage that we are able to use for commercial parking in the interim. It's the one that was previously used by the post office. Pursuing additional land sales within the River District area, for example, that includes Centennial Mills. And while we're disappointed that Lynn Development has stepped away from that project, we do have a number of other firms who have expressed interest, including folks who had come in on their original broker's listing of that property. And we will also be holding ongoing conversations with our infrastructure bureaus for commitments to the Broadway Corridor Master Plan public improvements. On Central East Side, our focus has long been in supporting small business and industrial users. We provided about 15 small business loans and grants over the past 2 years with a 5-to-1 leverage of investments, as well as focusing in 2 significant areas where new development could serve job growth and industrial growth in the district. The first is at the 3 blocks that we call the ODOT blocks that Prosper owns, and then also supporting OMSI in their master planning efforts. Since acquiring the ODOT blocks, we've actually been operating those lots as temporary parking to address the needs of businesses and tenants, particularly those in the historic buildings and along Southeast Water and Central East Side for district parking. And over the past year, we also issued request for proposals and selected Beam Development as our partner on ODOT blocks, and we've been working with them as well as Colas Construction to talk with the business community as well as the contracting community about how we optimize community benefits on that project. Over the coming year, we anticipate entering into a development agreement with the Beam team for the first phase of development, which they've been discussing as focusing on inclusive innovation. And we have been convening what we call a technical advisory committee to support OMSI's master plan, which is made up of many of our infrastructure bureau partners, knowing that there is a lot of interest in what happens along Southeast Water Avenue, as well as the river frontage from about Southeast Hawthorne south in that area. In North Macadam, with the termination of the ZRZ development agreement, our priorities for investment in South Waterfront do remain constant. First, supporting affordable housing and partnering with the Housing Bureau to realize the affordable housing goals of that area. As Kimberly mentioned, we were close partners with the Housing Bureau on the development of the River Place Parcel 3, what is today known as the VERA, which provides over 200 new units in the district, including 90 deeply affordable units. Our second priority that has been long-standing for the community is to support ongoing transportation and open space priorities in the district, and more specifically Southwest Bond Avenue, South Portal, and the Greenway. In fact, we partnered with PBOT over the past couple of years for the design and construction of the first phase of Southwest Bond that supports OHSU Schnitzer campus growth. And finally, to support economic development and job growth, including supporting OHSU and PSU, we have a development agreement with Portland State University, which has resulted in projects like the Combined Health and Education Program at the 4th and Montgomery project. Next slide. Our priority investments in the Oregon Convention Center area have focused on the construction of a garage required for the development of the new Convention Center Hotel. We have built and will own the garage in partnership with TriMet, who will tenant the ground floor and own some of the parking. And we're also currently looking at the potential for developing an office tower, which was part of the original design when the garage was designed, to further commercial growth and vitality at this end of the district. Similarly, we've been working with the new owners at Lloyd Center as they re-tenant the mall on opportunities for small businesses involved with our Inclusive Business Resource Network and our My People's Market initiatives. In the Neighborhood Prosperity Network areas, we have been focused on working with the district managers to provide 38 business improvement grants And we're also happy to say that all 7 districts are now being served by a workforce navigator who is an important connector to providing jobs access to folks living in those areas. And we've been able to support them by providing additional part-time staffing. Other activities that we would call out are 2 districts are currently sponsoring farmers markets with a focus on food equity. Our 42nd Avenue manager is managing 24,000 square feet of commercial space tied to our commercial affordability efforts. And Jade Districts, the Orchards, had its grand opening here in April. Over the upcoming year, we anticipate exploring new tax increment financing districts based on interest by Cully and other adjacent Prosperity Network area partners, as well as continuing to support the annual events that these areas sponsor. And the final areas that we'll talk about is our work in the Willamette Industrial District as well as Airport Way, which both focus on job growth and in particular industrial lands or space supply to support that job growth. An accomplishment in the Airport Way area is that we've been working with Cook Security where we sold them a parcel of land that we owned, and using the E-zone investment, they have committed to a public benefit agreement that includes internship opportunities, permanent workforce hiring opportunities, and partnering with local workforce development providers, as well as community partnerships and outreach. They'll be reporting out on that community benefit agreement for the first time this June. We've also been working with the port on an updated environmental assessment that will help inform future development in the area, and we do have an agreement with Scrambled Crow underway for future commercial or industrial development on 2 additional parcels in Airport Way. And with that, that concludes the district-specific portion of our presentation.
Great.
So we would be happy to take any questions. We know that that was a lot of information to digest. This is why the Budget Advisory Committee wants to meet year-round, because it's a lot. So happy to answer any questions now or.
Commissioner Daly.
I really only had one question pop up. Thanks for the presentation, and thank you for the recent tour. It really helped better grasp some of these projects to visit the sites in person. You mentioned on, I think, Old Town Chinatown, that there's a significant amount of funds left. What happens to that money? Does it just sit there and eventually get spent or reallocated?
So we are anticipating with that particular action plan that we will be coming back to our board for an extension. While we have made progress on many of the measures of success, as Lisa mentioned, we've only expended 10 to 15% of what we had anticipated.
Yeah.
But particularly because Central City 2035 is now adopted and some of the design considerations are finalized, we anticipate actually that the preponderance or all of the resources will be deployed in the next 5 years. So in the event that 5 years from now, it's, we haven't been able to, or even 2 or 3 years from now, it looks like Lansdale Gardens not moving forward, or 4th and Burnside doesn't need resources, or the property at Northwest 4th and Davis doesn't need something, then we'll come back both to our board and to the Budget Advisory Committee, as well as to the Community Association, which is one of our key partners in terms of the priorities.
And then what happens? I mean, I'm just curious, what would happen to that money if it isn't spent within a certain period of time?
Yeah, so we would reallocate. So there will be a number of priorities within Broadway Corridor and the post office that will require resources, infrastructure improvements and the like. We also have about $100 million of improvements that are needed at Union Station, which is in the same TIF district. And so while we want to continue to make sure that we apply resources as we promised, in the event that we weren't able to invest in Old Town Chinatown, there would be a number of other priorities that we would also be able to support. At the end of the life of a TIF district, if there are remaining resources, when the last date to issue debt has passed, that fund remains available for expenditures. So we would continue to look for opportunities to deliver on the plan.
Great, thank you.
Very good. Thank you for the report. We appreciate it. Thank you for your great work. This meeting of the Prosper Portland Budget Committee is continued to tonight at 6:30 PM at the World Forestry Center, which is located at 4033 Southwest Canyon Road, where we will hear public testimony on the budget.
Thank you.
The city council is adjourned.
Is it customary in all the budget or just the? Yeah.